Mike, welcome to Small Business Strong. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Okay, well, glad to be here.
Awesome. So tell me about Keo Fish Farms.
All right, Keo Fish Farm. We have about 1,000 acres of ponds here at Keo, Arkansas, which is, of course, where the farm got its name. But we primarily raise two species of fish. We raise the hybrid striped bass, which is a cross between an ocean species, the striped bass, that's anadromous, spawns in fresh water, and the white bass, which is native to Arkansas. The striped bass is not. We cross those two fish to make a hybrid, and it just like you do in any other crop, you have the hybrid vigor. It allows the fish to grow faster and to do better in different water parameters, et cetera. And Keo Fish Farm is the largest producer of hybrid striped bass in the world. In a normal year, we'll spawn 100 to 130 million baby fish, stock them out in our ponds. We'll also ship them to other countries live. We'll also ship them to a lot of probably some of them going, we have two markets for that fish. There's some's a recreational market, and there's also the food fish market. Although we don't produce any food fish, we produce the babies for other farmers. We also produce the sterile triploid grass carp. This is a fish that's been genetically engineered not to reproduce. It's from the Amur River system of China, so it's not native. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service brought this fish in the United States in 1964 in response to the Clean Water Act. Basically, the Clean Water Act instructed federal agencies and federal employees to quit using so many chemicals and try to find biological controls. Unfortunately, when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife brought this fish into the United States in 1964, they didn't know how to make it sterile. They let it escape. There are 4 different species of Asian carp. A lot of people have probably heard about the silver carp. That's the one that jumps. It's in the Mississippi River, knocks people out of boats, etc. The grass carp, I tell people, is a good Asian carp. It really hasn't caused any ecological damage in the United States. And private industry learned in about 1983 how to make them sterile. And I'll talk probably quite a bit more about that later. But that's kind of Keo Fish Farm in a nutshell. That's our little niche market that we've got.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I can't wait to jump into that here in a little bit. So let's go back to the beginning. What got you interested in the outdoors and fish in general?
Well, it's kind of ironic, exactly, because, and you'll see some of the deer heads behind me, I like to hunt. And so when I was going to graduate high school many, many years ago, my plan was to go to Alaska and live off the land, et cetera. I guess I'd read too many Jack London novels or something, but I had my mother and my girlfriend at that time convinced me that I needed to go to college. And I was a pretty much straight A student in high school. And so decided, well, if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to manage in fisheries and wildlife management. Went to Arkansas Tech University at Russellville, Arkansas for a bachelor's degree in fisheries and wildlife management. My major professor there at the time, he had a philosophy that if you like to hunt, you need to go into fisheries. If you like to fish, you need to go into wildlife management, which made a lot of sense. And actually, I wound up kind of veering into fisheries management. Met my wife there at Arkansas Tech, not the girlfriend that convinced me to go to college, but met my wife there. And we've actually been married, it's 54 years. But then I got my master's degree in fisheries from Murray State University. Went to work for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission. I was going to work for the Game and Fish Commission my whole life. I actually had what experience I had growing up as a young adult teenager. I went and worked with my cousin who was a farmer in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He was a row crop farmer. I very quickly decided I was never, ever in my life going to be a farmer. And you talk about stories. He would put us out there, with a jug of water, hoeing cotton, and you'd be out there all day long. Or I'll always remember he would put me on a little open air, small tractor, disking ground, and I'd spend like all week long disking one field. When I got done, I was so happy. I wanted to go fishing, frog hunting, all the things kids want to do. Yeah. We called him Uncle James Ray, even though he's my cousin. I said, James Ray, what do you want me to do now? And he told me to disc the field the other direction. And I figured right then and there, I was not cut out for farming.
No.
But I got my master's degree in fisheries and wildlife management, went to work for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and really was happy there. I had another employee that convinced me that we ought to look at aquaculture because working as a state employee, it had great benefits, but it didn't pay very well. And I can remember when I went to work for him with a master's degree back a long, long time ago in about 1976, it paid $6,000 a year.
Wow.
So that was hard to make ends meet. But, my wife, she had a job. So we got by and actually were quite happy. I left the Game and Fish Commission in 1983 and along with two former Game and Fish employees, and we formed a little company called Arkansas Aquatics. And we basically were going to raise any kind of fish we could raise that we could sell. Now, the problem was we knew how to raise fish, but we really didn't have very much business sense. I mean, our first crop of fish, we got them raised. It was November. We were ready to sell them. That's when we found out there was no market for them till April. So we had to take care of them through the winter. And for the first 3 years, we were very, very lucky to survive, basically. 1986 decided, well, kind of like you've heard the story that, you're going to need a bigger dump truck. Decided if we're going to stay in this, we need to buy a farm. So we started came up with the business plan, started trying to buy our own farm, because in those preceding 3 years, what we had done, we would rent old rundown fish farms, get them all fixed up, and invariably the owner would take them back over and we'd have to go get another old rundown fish farm and start to fix it up. So after 3 years of that, we decided we wanted to own our own land, et cetera. Unfortunately, this is some more of that business sense we didn't have. We didn't have the equity to be able to purchase the land. We met a previous fish farmer, a gentleman named Keo Fish in 1986 here at Keo, and he was going to sell us his old dilapidated fish farm, and he was going to own or finance it, which was great for us.
Yeah.
So we entered into negotiations with Keo. It was about 1,600 acres of land we were going to attempt to buy. And unfortunately, Keo was killed in a plane crash. He was crop dusting while we were in negotiations. So that kind of left us flat-footed, not knowing what we were going to do. Cleo's wife, Martha Milkovich, she was devastated, of course. She'd lost her husband, but she also found out after the crash that the farm was $1.2 million in debt.
Wow.
Keo had always told her, if anything happens to me, Martha, don't worry. I think he probably had life insurance at that time. This was also at a time when farmland had decreased in value from $2,000 an acre to $300 or $400 an acre.
Wow.
So it was a big upheaval in farming going on in the late 80s, kind of like what I'm afraid we may be about to experience here in the next few years.
Yeah.
So when all of this happened, one of my two business partners decided, hey, I'm going to go back to work for the Game and Fish Commission. We tried this for 3 years, and he left and went back to work for the Game and Fish Commission, actually retired working there. The other partner and I were trying to figure out what we were going to do when Martha approached us and said, why don't I become your partner? I own all this land. Yes, it's deeply in debt, but maybe we can, we've got the existing loans. Maybe we can do something. So Prudential Insurance Company had the primary loan on the whole farm. Keo had made all the payments. So we went to Prudential and said, hey, how about you take the note, the interest or the payment that's coming due here in just a few months, put it on the back end of the note, and let us try to see if we can restart this farm. And I want to back up a minute. Keo and Martha had actually started Keo Fish Farm in 1950, and they'd operated it very successfully as a bait fish farm. They were raising minnows. There was a huge demand for minnows in the 50s and 60s as the Corps of Engineers built reservoir after reservoir after reservoir. And back then, when people went fishing, all they used was live bait minnows. There were very few jigs or lures, and everybody needed minnows. So there was this huge demand for it. But Keo was always the adventurous sort, so he and Martha went off to Honduras to try to raise soybeans in the jungle and left the fish farm here while they were gone. And the market changed and the demand for minnows wasn't as great. And so when they came back, the fish farm part of it had kind of fallen into disarray. This is when we entered the picture in about 1986. So anyway, we decided to become partners with Martha. Keo also had two other loans on the farm. He had a small business administration loan and what we now call FSA, but he had a FSA loan. He had not made a payment on those loans in over 5 years.
Wow.
So they were in arrears. But remember, I told you that land values had dropped from 2,000 to 300 or 400.
Yeah.
So then that's really kind of what got them in financial difficulty because their assets had plummeted. Because of that, if the farm went under, Prudential was going to lose a lot of money, but FSA and small business, they weren't going to get a dime because they were secondary and tertiary.
Yeah.
So we went to them and said, what about you make our loans current and let's start over again? Even though you hadn't been paid in 5 years, you're not going to get anything if we don't try this.
Yeah.
And because of that, they were willing to basically start over and allow us to kind of pull this farm up from its bootstraps. At that time, Cleo had been very actively knocking a lot of the internal levees down. So now we had a lot of ponds that were 100 acres, 120 acres. And I tell people those aren't ponds, those are lakes, and they're very hard to manage. So then we went back to FSA and said, how about you loan us another $150,000 so we can cut these ponds up and get them more manageable and start making a good crop. I tell people only the federal government would loan somebody money that had not paid them in 5 years, but they agreed to do that. So that allowed us to take the existing ponds and cut them up into 10 acres, 20 acres, things that were much more manageable where we could actually raise crops. So starting in 1986, we started with 200 acres in production, and every year the rest of it was leased out to row crop farmers. Every year we took a little more back and we got bigger and bigger. And within about 5 years, we were able to pay off Prudential, FSA, and Small Business Administration. Now, that didn't mean that we were completely out of debt. What it meant, we were able, by that time, we had a track record and we could renegotiate our land loan. Land values had also come up a little. We renegotiated our loan with Ag Heritage at a much lower interest rate and paid off, instead of dealing with 3 lenders, now we're only dealing with 1 and at a much better interest rate. And so it took us under probably 15 years to completely pay that off, but we weren't in a big hurry. We were putting all of our money back into the farm. I had a lot of luck along the way. A lot of people helped us. A lot of people were praying for us because, it was a big deal to try to take a dilapidated farm and just, start from scratch, so to speak. But
Yeah.
a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and hard work. Now we're debt free. We own about, I think, 1,700 acres. At one time, we had 1,300 acres of ponds, but now we're back down to 1,000. We're actually raising more fish out of that 1,000 we did to 1,300 just because more intensive management.
Wow. So those first 5 years when you were just grinding to pay back that loan, just getting started on everything, were you still producing minnows as a primary fish, or did you switch over?
We were producing any kind of fish we thought anybody would buy. We had some catfish, we had minnows, we had bluegill, probably largemouth bass, anything we thought we could sell. But slowly but surely, it was in 83 that the sterile grass carp, we learned how to make grass carp sterile. That became one of our big sellers. And then actually we had some unintentional help from Congress. Because in 1983, Congress passed the Striped Bass Emergency Act. There was a huge commercial fisheries for striped bass along the eastern seaboard. Here in the South, we all eat catfish. You go to Maryland, New York, Carolinas, a lot of those states, those people won't even touch a catfish. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I love catfish, but they're used to eating striped bass. And there was a huge commercial fisheries out of the Atlantic Ocean for striped bass, but unfortunately, that fishery had been overfished and so depleted that Congress intervened. And they basically shut that commercial fisheries down in 1983. So suddenly, I can remember it now. We didn't start Keo Fish Farm to 86, but when we were still Arkansas Aquatics, we did our first hybrid striped bass pond. So where are we going to sell all of these fish? Lo and behold, one food fish farmer that was getting started in California bought our entire crop.
Wow.
Because suddenly there was this huge demand for hybrid striped bass as a food fish. And that demand has grown and grown. Their commercial fishery for striped bass along the Atlantic seaboard has been reopened, but it's not nearly as large as it once was. When I tell people, if you go back in history, when the Pilgrims arrived, there were so many striped bass during the spawning season trying to go up the rivers. They said you could actually walk across the rivers on the back of the fish.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it was Virginia or Massachusetts, the very first law that they passed, conservation type law, was that you couldn't use striped bass as fertilizer for corn anymore or for anything.
Wow.
There's a lot, there's a long history there. A lot of people don't realize that from the time Christopher Columbus came to the United States until, for instance, the Pilgrims, which was several hundred years later, there were ships coming from Europe to the United States and catching fish, and they were putting them in the cod primarily, and striped bass, but they were salting them, preserving them, and taking them back to Europe as a cheap source of protein.
Wow.
So those times are long gone. If you Google or get on the internet, one of the problems we're having is the oceans are being stained at what they call maximum sustainable yield. A lot of wild fisheries are depleted. A lot of fisheries are being highly regulated now. There's quotas. There's government bodies that are saying you can only catch this much, then we're going to shut down. We're getting probably as many fish as we can get out of the ocean. So aquaculture has kind of started to take the place of the wild capture fish, or is augmenting it, because the two work hand in hand. I do not want to disparage wild caught fish at all. There's not anything wrong with wild caught fish, but farm raised fish are just as good. You know, with farm raised fish, you know what the fish is eating, what's going into it. So, and this is from somebody, like I said, we don't raise any food fish. One of our big part of our business model early on, we decided that we didn't want to compete with our customers we were selling our baby fish to. So we have stayed out of the food fish market. And now we just raise, I tell people, if it's the chicken industry, we raise the baby chicks, but it's the fish industry, so we raise the baby fish.
Yep.
And we sell a lot of them.
Man. So take me back to the first couple weeks of acquiring Keo Fish Farms. What was that like emotionally? Were you, I mean, because that's a lot to walk into, right?
Well, one of the good things was my business partner and I, we really didn't have to risk anything. Our names weren't on the loans. Martha's name was on the loan.
Okay.
And we couldn't change that, because one of the good things that they had acquired as they were in debt, they had about $300,000 in tax credits. And if we changed any of the ownership, those tax credits disappeared.
Okay.
So that basically meant our first $300,000 of profit, which was a lot of money back then, we weren't going to have to pay taxes on it, and we could plow it right back into the business. But I have some old pictures of Keo Fish Farm back then. The weeds around the building were 6 feet tall. I mean, it was a mess. And we just had to slowly but surely, as I said, take one bite out of the apple at a time. We couldn't put 1,000 acres instantly in production, so we would try a couple of hundred, and then we would add, as we divided some of the ponds up, we'd add a few more and add a few more. And the row crop farmer that we worked with was very gracious. He knew that our ultimate goal was not to be row crop farmers, but was to turn all of that 1,000 acres of old ponds back into new ponds.
Yeah. So you said earlier you knew how to raise the fish, but you didn't know how to sell them. How'd you learn how to sell them?
Through trial and error. I mean, the first thing anybody does if they don't know how to sell something is they drop the price, thinking that dropping the price is going to buy you business. And it will, but it doesn't necessarily help with your profitability. We learned, one of the things we've learned over the years is that, quality matters very, very much. And then it depends, you develop a relationship with your customers, how you treat them. I like to tell people that you don't have to make money off every single time that you do sell your fish, but you got to make it off most of the times, or you won't be profitable. And so one of the things is, we guarantee our fish. If we normally control the transportation of them, our customers are more than welcome to come pick them up themselves, but a lot of them want us to set the transportation up. And if we're the ones setting the transportation up, then we'll guarantee that fish all the way into the destination, into their building, their ponds, or wherever they're rearing them. One part of our business model that we use, especially on our grass carp, is we sell those fish to small fish farms in other states. For instance, every week we have a truck that we send up through Ohio and Indiana that goes to all of these small fish farmers that they may only have 40 acres or 50 acres of ponds, but they've got a good customer base, and they can't supply that out of their own ponds. So they're buying fish out of Arkansas, for instance. And we set it up to where if they want to buy largemouth bass or red ear sunfish or some fish we don't raise, we'll buy those from our neighbors for them and do all the logistics to get them the fish, just so they'll buy our grass carp and our hybrid striped bass.
Wow. So are there other farms like in your area that offer the different types of fish, or you?
Yes. In Lonoke County, Prairie County, and then maybe some of the northeastern parts of Arkansas, there's a lot of aquaculture in our area. At one time, Arkansas had had about 35,000 acres of catfish farms, had about 35,000 acres of other species, primarily bait fish. But a lot of those bait fish farms, as the bait fish market decreased, they switched over into game fish production.
Wow.
Now Arkansas has, of course, the sterile triploid grass carp. There's 3 large farms here in Lonoke County that produce probably 95% of those fish for the whole United States.
Wow.
So there's the sterile triploid grass carp farms. There's the sport fish farms that do largemouth bass, red ear, sunfish, black crappie, bluegill, hybrid bluegill, and channel catfish running for stocking ponds. There's some large farms that do that. We have the largest largemouth bass food fish facility in the United States, a farmer that produces millions of pounds of largemouth bass that are 2 pounds apiece that primarily go into the food fish market in other states.
Yeah.
Some of it for stocking, but primarily food fish. We have the largest bait fish farm in the United States. That's IF Anderson in Lonoke. They're like 3,500 acres of just bait fish. And that bait fish industry has changed over the years. It used to be all the bait fish were sold in the spring. They were put on big trucks, delivered all over the country to satellite distribution points where small trucks picked them up. Now, a lot of those bait fish are delivered FedEx right to your door. So they've kind of knocked the middleman out and increased their profit by doing that. But there's still, we don't probably have 35,000 acres of non-catfish ponds anymore, but we probably got maybe 25 to 30,000 acres that raise other species besides catfish. Our food fish catfish industry in Arkansas, though, has really plummeted. There's probably only about 2,000 acres in catfish food production in Arkansas anymore.
Really?
So there was a huge market in channel catfish. Unfortunately, Vietnam and China were able to raise some different species that are air-breathing fish at much higher densities. Their governments provided like free fish food to their farmers, so our farmers weren't able to compete with that. Whenever you go eat catfish, I know in Texas they have labeling laws. You can ask, is it U.S. farm-raised catfish? And to be honest, if it's not, I won't eat it.
Wow.
Because I've dealt enough with some of these other countries that we sell fish to know that their environmental regulations, their safety regulations, their food inspection process is not near as secure as what we have here in the United States.
Yeah. So another thing you said was you can't raise everything. You specialize in what you can sell. What did that lesson cost you?
Well, I mean, when you're raising something you can't sell, then you either have to give it away, or you raise it to a size that maybe it's not as profitable, or birds, you have a lot of bird predation and then you lose your profitability there. So you kind of have to figure out, all right, what am I good at? And fortunately, when I worked for the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, I was actually in charge of all their special fishing activities, and I was their fisheries research, head of their fisheries research department. And they taught me how to raise grass carp and Asian carp, and how to raise hyperstriped bass and striped bass. So
wow.
That's why I said I knew how to raise those.
So that's where you learned. And then did you just bring that over and just kind of test it and see what the market was like on it?
Right. And like I said, initially, we thought the hyperstriped bass market was going to be very small. Little did we realize that the bulk of our hyperstriped bass now wind up on somebody's plate. We sell these to food fish growers in other states like Texas, our largest customers in Texas, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, other places where they raise the food fish up. Some of those fish go into niche markets where it's a live fish market, but most of them are sold dead on ice, kind of like, well, a lot of the catfish is processed into fillets, etc. Most of your hybrid striped bass, there's some further processing, but most of it is sold whole on ice and shipped like to the Fulton Fish Market in New York.
Yeah. Wow. So we're going to talk about legacy. What legacy do you hope to leave beyond Keo Fish Farms?
Well, I don't know. Of course, my wife and I have 2 daughters. One's a doctor and one's an attorney. Neither one of them really wanted anything to do. They worked out here growing up, but yeah, they really didn't want to work the fish farm. Miss Martha is still my partner. Now, we bought out my one partner. And Martha is 94. She's out here today. She comes out every day. She's semi-retired about 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, when I finally convinced my son-in-law, Seth Summerside, to come into the business. So Seth is a phenomenal business person. We're teaching him about the fish, but he got his degree, his master's degree in business at the University of Arkansas, worked for Tyson's, worked for Ryson Foods. And finally I said, look, I got to have some help here. So, and as from the business end of it, he's phenomenal. I am still working at the fish farm. A lot of people are like, why don't you retire? I love it. I love working out here. I love coming here every day. I mean, I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning to get here, and I don't go home till 5, but it's something I really enjoy. And if I wasn't doing it, I don't know what I'd do. I'd have to do what my wife wants me to do, which is help her with gardening and plants and stuff that don't tell her, but I don't really want to do that. But, well, you know, and we haven't even talked about our employees. We're kind of unique. Most fish farms in the area and a lot of our row crop farmers now have to use H-2A employees. Those are employees that can come to the United States under special H-2A permit from the government. They work, I think, 9 or 10 months out of the year. Then they're required by law to go back to their home country for the 2 or 3 months and before they can come back again and work again. When you use H-2A workers, it's a total different mentality. And you think about it. They're away from their family. They're away from their home. While they're here, they want to work as many hours as they can. Yeah. If you only work them 40 hours a week, they're not going to be happy. They want to work 60 or 70. Yeah. And they want to take that money and go back home and, you know, provide for their family and their relatives and stuff. We use local labor. Local labor, it's a totally different mindset. Yes, you know, they want to make a lot of money, but they only want to work 40 hours a week normally. So if you don't have enough, and instead of trying to work 60, 70 hours a week to get everything done, you have to have enough employees that you can get things done in 40 hours, even if some of them work slightly different shifts. You also have to kind of put yourself in I think this is something I learned from being a state employee. You have to put yourself in their shoes. I mean, yes, they want to make money, but they want to make money so they can go to their kids' baseball games, so they can, you know, provide for their family, so they can have a new car or whatever it is that they want. I laugh when people talk about minimum wage because, you know, you get what you pay for, and nobody can support a family on minimum wage. No. Not at 40 hours a week. So either their wife has to work or they have to have 2 jobs. And rather than that, you need to provide for them because your employees are your most valuable asset. I mean, you want your employees to feel vested in your company. You want them to feel as if they're part of it. So we have a profit sharing plan that we fully fund, that if they work for us a long time, they're going to build up a very large nest egg because that money is growing, you know, prior to taxes, just like an RA. We also provide them at Christmas time with a very good bonus. All of our employees, they have 15 days off a year that they can choose. You know, they just have to give us notice in advance. And then we shut down for 15 days. The only time we shut the farm down is from about a week before Christmas till after New Year's. Wow. And everybody's off there in that time so it's a slow time of year for us and they can spend that time with their family and stuff. So they get about 30 days a year off. We have very, very low employee turnover. I'd like to, you know, some of my farmer friends, how do you find, you know, local labor? I said, well, first of all, you're probably going to go through, especially for the manual labor, you're going to have to go through several people because, you know, most of the people that are manual laborers, the ones that catch the fish, et cetera, a lot of them, either they dropped out of high school or maybe they had an issue with some kind of drug abuse or something, or a broken marriage. There was something in their life that prevented them from maybe obtaining the training and the stuff that they wanted. So we want to be able to provide them with that training, and we want them to, you know, to have ownership. Most of our employees are on salary. We still have some that are younger employees that punch time clocks, but I'll tell you, I'll deviate here a minute and tell you a little story. When you've got people that are on salary and they're expected to they're expected to come to work at 8 o'clock and work till 4, sometimes some tend to get a little lax and they may not come till 8:05 or 8:10. And this can cause you lots of problems because if they're part of a crew, that crew really can't go do its job till they show up. So for years, we tried to, you know, I'd chastise them, I'd threaten them, I'd tell them, I'm going to put you back on hourly or something. Well, what we finally found out that worked best was instead of us being as employers being the bad guy, Seth and I, or Martha, Seth and I, we said, look, here's what we're going to do. You get a bonus at the end of the year for every day that you're late. Doesn't matter if you're a minute late or 10 minutes late. We're going to fine you $10. It's going to come out of your bonus at the end of the year.
Wow.
And I'm not going to keep that money. I'm going to take that $10 and I'm going to divide it up among the employees that were here on time.
I love it.
So it became almost comical after we did that because the guys are sitting there, like right now we're starting at 6 o'clock. Well, at about a minute to 6, they're sitting there looking at their watch. There's actually an alarm that goes off and we give them 1 minute. So it's 6:01.
Yeah.
And they're waiting on the alarm to go off. They have to have a foot in the door before that alarm goes off or they're deemed the $10. So the employees are sitting there saying, he's not going to make it. She's not going to get here on time. We're going to get their money. And so we're not the bad guys anymore. But the other employees, they don't like, I mean, if they're late, they're a little upset. But at the end of the year, the way it actually shakes out is if you were late 20 days, you may be fined 200. But remember, you get a percentage of that money that the other people were late. So in reality, it's not as bad as it seems, but it's still, if you have somebody that's really a good worker, but he's chronically late, he's going to lose a little bit of money at the end of the year. And some others are going to make it. And so they feel rewarded for being on time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what do you look for when you hire?
Well, I think, first of all, if we're hiring somebody new, and I'm talking about from a labor position, we have our managerial position, our biologist that has degree, et cetera. Those are somewhat different. We hire those out of college, et cetera. And we've got about 21 employees, if you count Seth and I and Martha. But when we're looking for a labor, I've basically come to the assumption, unless it's someone that's related to someone that works here, is I'll talk to my employees. I said, look, so-and-so is leaving. He's moving. He's going to go back to college, or he's going to do this, or he's got married and moving to another state or something. Well, I think we need to hire somebody. They don't want anybody that's not a hard worker.
Yeah.
Because if you've got somebody that's got issues, that's not a hard worker, that makes their job harder to do. So you can usually your employees will help you find some good employees, but you have to be willing to sometimes. I'm a great believer in giving people a second chance. And just because somebody's had a problem, you need to let them know what's expected of them, to be on time, to work hard, stay off your telephone all day long, and do the job I'm giving you. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take, it's hard physical labor. You take breaks, in between. I'm fine with that, but do the job that you're assigned, because we've got to get these fish caught and get them, to our customers, or none of us get paid.
Yeah. Is it possible today to start small, reinvest your profits, and slowly build a successful business in this industry, like a fish farming industry? Or has it changed too much that you have to go get an SBA loan, you have to lease land, you have to do all the improvements?
I think you can start small. One of the things, though, is you're either going to have a spouse, someone to help support you while you do that. We started with $3,000. 3 of us put $1,000 in.
Wow.
I think you can start small. In fact, we've got a gentleman, but there's a lot of government helps. There's beginning farmer loans from FSA. There's stuff like that to help you get started. But it's going to be hard work. But I think you can get started small and put the money back in. And I'm thinking of a particular farmer over in Oklahoma that's been in it about 3 or 4 years now. And he's come up with a novel idea, one that I had thought about a long time ago. He's actually shipping sport fish direct to the consumer to their door, where they order off the internet. He has to make sure that you do all the permits and everything that's required to ship. But then he's got a special rate with a couple of other farms through FedEx. So if you want 5 grass carp in North Carolina, he can ship 5 grass carp right to your door, as opposed to you trying to find someone local that you can buy from. And usually that means you have to travel to them if you're not buying very many fish. But he's slowly but surely building up, a good business, and he's reinvesting in his business.
Wow. So if you lost your facility, your customers, your labor, everything, and you had to start over from scratch, but you kept your knowledge, how would you start over today?
I'm probably too old to want to do that. if I was younger, first of all, I would, and this is me personally, I would not want to get into what I call a dead fish market. When you're dealing with a dead product, fillets or consuming, you either have to have, in my opinion, if when you do that, you may be having to deal with foreign imports that are going to immediately put you at a disadvantage because, as I said earlier, they don't have the environmental regulations, they don't have the food safety regulations, their labor's a lot cheaper, et cetera. I think you have to pick your markets where one thing, if all you have is a single market, you're in danger. For instance, with our hybrid striped bass, we have a recreational market and a food fish market.
Okay.
Where we're selling the babies to someone to raise the food fish. Two totally different markets.
Yep.
With our grass carp, we have not only the people that have a 1 acre pond that are buying them, we've got large government entities, state agencies, Corps of Engineers that we put bids in on to sell to. There could even be a food fish market there, but we're not that interested in it. But you want to stay nimble when you're starting out, and you've got to figure out your niche. It could be something as simple as you get into raising aquaria fish, although the aquaria industry has, in the last few years, has kind of decreased and it's consolidated a lot. I would be more interested in, my advice, somebody would be getting the sport fish industry because, I'm a baby boomer. There's a lot of baby boomers. Most of the baby boomers are now out of the workforce. They've got a lot of grandkids. A lot of them have got acreage they own that they have a pond on. There's also pond management business where I may own a 3 or 4 acre pond and I want to manage it. Maybe I want to raise trophy largemouth bass, or I want to raise where my grandkids can catch a fish every time they throw a hook in, or I just want to raise fish to eat. I mean, there may be all these different philosophies that the pond owner wants. Well, he's willing to hire somebody to help him achieve that. Tell me what I need to do. How do I need to build the pond? How do I need to stock it, et cetera, so I can achieve my goal. So there's pond management companies. Then there's the stocking business that works hand in hand with the pond management company. From the pond management aspect, instead of just raising fish, you may be helping them put some kind of aeration system in, managing aquatic vegetation with some of it with chemicals or with our sterile triploid grass carp. So there's all these kind of niche markets. And when you say niche market, people always think of something very small. It can start small, but it can grow really large.
Yeah.
We've got some farmers in Kentucky that are raising saltwater shrimp in freshwater or freshwater prawns. They have like a farmer's market every year where they sell their entire crop in a very short time, and they built a very loyal customer base. You can take something like that, and as you expand it, maybe you get into whole foods, or some or organic production, et cetera. But you just kind of got to find where your passion is and how you want to do that.
Yeah. So I took a look at your resume, and it is pretty lengthy. You've been busy the last 49 years. What accomplishment are you most proud of?
Well, probably besides the fish farm, which I'm extremely proud of, I've had the opportunity to serve on a lot of boards and commissions. The two of them are near and dear to me. One is the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, which was a governor's appointment. Each year, the governor gets to appoint one person to be a commissioner for 7 years. And once you're put on, you're there for 7 years unless you commit a felony or something. But it was a goal that I had set to go back, and because I used to work for this commission, and I saw that those 7 commissioners could have a tremendous impact on the natural resources of our state. So I thought I want to someday be one of those commissioners. And we had Governor Mike Huckabee was our governor, and he appointed me there, and I'll forever be grateful to him. So I got to serve 7 years there. When that was done, you cannot be reappointed. I've always been very interested in politics, and because one of the biggest constraints on fish farming is regulations. That's another whole subject. I could talk to you for a long time about government regulations, be they state, federal, et cetera. And I've got a file folder of permits that allow us to do business in other states. It's probably 6 inches thick. But because of that, I wanted to get involved in Arkansas Farm Bureau. Most people, you have Texas Farm Bureau. Most people, when you say Farm Bureau, they think about an insurance. really your Farm Bureau is a agricultural advocacy group or federation. Initially when Farm Bureau was formed, they didn't sell insurance. They advocated for rural electricity. They wanted, advocated for things that would make life easier on the farm for farmers. They advocated for like no sales tax on input items, et cetera. They got very politically involved. And I saw that. So I wanted to get involved in Farm Bureau. I served on my county board for quite a few years, was president. Then I elected to the state board where I was representing like 13 different counties. I did that for 10 years. Then I finally took another step up and became vice president of Arkansas Farm Bureau for 6 years. And everybody in Farm Bureau tried to talk me into becoming president. But after serving as vice president for 6 years and realizing that I was getting on up in my age, I decided that was a full-time job, basically 3 days a week that I was going to have to be away from the farm, that I had given enough after 16 years. So I retired from vice president last year.
Yeah.
And I've served on Pollution Control and Ecology Commission. I was on the Arkansas Development and Finance Authority, which did housing loans for low income. I've been on numerous federal agencies. I believe it's not enough, I think, just to have a business. I think you have to give back. And I think you have to get involved in various boards and commissions. It'll help you in your business, but also it helps other farmers and ranchers. And to me, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
We have a young, like Arkansas Farm Bureau and all the farm bureaus, states I know of, have a young farmers and ranchers organization that's geared to try to get people interested in farming and ranching. The median age of farmers and ranchers is like 65. It's getting older and older, and we need young people to come into our industry.
Yeah. What's something you would say to a young person who's looking to get into this industry?
I would say that dream big. It can be whatever you want it to be. I would say the hard work and effort you put into it, you'll be rewarded. One of the things I told you about, I probably would favor getting into the sport fish end of it. One of the reasons is because you set the price of what you're selling. Depending on the market you're going into. If you're selling somebody 20 bass, there's a different price than if you're selling them 20,000 and that kind of stuff. So you can really, you can grow as big as you want. You can fulfill your life's passion, but it really needs to be something that you want to do. I think there's no better environmental stewards of our land than farmers.
Yeah.
Farmers are most people, they trust farmers. They make their living off the land, and the vast majority of them wouldn't want to do anything to hurt that land because they're either going to it's going to be their legacy that they're going to leave to their family, and it's how they make their livings off that land.
Yeah. So last question I have, and then I'll open it up if you want to add anything else,
Okay.
was you've been married since 1974. What is a secret to building a great marriage?
Saying yes, honey.
Okay.
And seriously, people tease me a lot because my wife and I, a lot of times, I may ride with her, but she won't ride with me. We're not very good companions in a vehicle together. We're different type personalities. So if we go somewhere together, usually she does most of the driving. Occasionally, if she's tired, she'll ask me to. And people say, why do you do that? I said, that's why we've been married so long.
Yeah.
But one of the things is listening to I couldn't have done what I've done without my wife.
Yeah.
She's been extremely supportive. The times when I had to be at the farm and couldn't be there for the kids, she's raised our 2 children, and she's helped raise our 3 grandchildren.
Wow.
My 2 daughters, one lives a mile to the west of us, one a mile to the east of us, and we live in suburban West Little Rock. That was something that we all chose to do because she takes those kids to school, picks them up after school, and helps raise them, which eases the burden on my 2 daughters and their families. And so we're very, very family oriented, but my wife's been my partner. She's been a godsend.
That's amazing, man. What great advice. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with or anything you want to talk about?
Well, I just hope that if somebody that watches this, that they'll think about, if it's not aquaculture, that it's some other form of farming, because it can be very rewarding to do something with water and soil. And it's like the row crop farmer or the special commodity farmer that raises vegetables, et cetera. There's something special about planting a seed or putting, baby fish in a pond and watching them grow. One of my favorite things to do out here, and I think I've got my 8-year-old grandson hooked on it, is to feed the fish when we have them here under the shed, getting them ready to ship.
Yeah.
Just walking out there and they all come running up to you in the vat, and, they're dependent on you. It's not like maybe a companion animal, but you do feel, you want to take care of them. Even if you know that someday somebody's going to eat them while they're in your care, you want them to be taken care of. And you get a lot of joy and enjoyment out of that. And I always tell young people, we do a lot of tours here, everything from kindergarten up to maybe assisted living homes, but with college students, et cetera. We don't do professional tours. It's got to be somebody that we know or that's asked, et cetera, because it takes us away to do it. But I tell people, especially young college students, I said, I could work in a job that I absolutely hated for a short amount of time if it was going to allow me to progress to a job that I loved.
Yeah.
But life is too short to work in a job that you're not happy going to every day.
Yeah.
And so, yes, money's important. Money, depending on, may or may not, depending on the person, buy you happiness. But there's a lot more to life than money. And being able to do something that you love and that you want to do and that you feel rewarded in. And yes, it's also important to be able to make money at it, to be sustainable. But that's what gives you a good outlook on life. And I tell, people are like, well, farmers are eternal optimists. And that's true. They always think the next year is going to be better. Or if they're having troubles this year, that we'll have the rainfall we need the next year, or my markets will be better, or, something like that. But I always tell people when they're facing some kind of tragedy, the way to get through it is think about how much worse it could be. Yeah. Maybe you just had a car wreck. Well, did you not think that maybe God had you had that car wreck? Because if you didn't, you were going to be killed 10 minutes down the road. So you kind of gotta, you gotta have a good outlook on life.
Yeah. That's great. That's very helpful. Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I've enjoyed it, and I know I've probably talked more than I should have, but you opened up the can of worms, okay?
I'm glad I opened it. Thank you.
All right. Well, you take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.